Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited about this next session. It is talking about information professionals and governance and AI and all of the details about how their roles are changing and why governance is important now. And to talk to us about this, I would like to welcome Fleur Levitz to our stage. Fleur has a rich history of AI governance and from a library standpoint, and also just well, I'll let her tell you, actually. I know the details, but it would be way more effective coming from Fleur. So thank you for joining us, Fleur.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that intro. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fleur Levitz. Today I'll be speaking about responsible AI, not just AI, responsible AI, and the role that information professionals will play as leaders in this space. AI is not just a technical shift, it's a socio-technical transformation in how information is created, interpreted, trusted. In this talk, I'll discuss the history of information professionals and argue that the current challenges of AI require investment in governance at scale. Information professionals are the roles to expand to meet these needs. So it's my bio here, but it just important for this talk is that I started my career in advertising, but then I went to school for library science. I got a master's degree in library science, and I thought that I would work in a university library. And I realized that no, I really like being in business, and I want to solve business problems, but to have the foundation of, to be rooted in library science principles. And then after that degree, I ended up working on Wall Street. So I had a whole career on Wall Street. I kind of grew up in data. I grew up in the sort of the era of reference data, which then became data governance and chief data office and all of those kind of shifts in how data is used and shared. And then I also ended up working at IBM. Shout out to IBM, Watson. And then I left IBM and I ran my own firm. And I've done the shift from sort of information science and library science to data governance and now AI governance. And I see the same sort of principles rooted in all of this. So what I'm talking about is basically what I've lived in my career. So and I think a lot of the talks in this conference, we're talking about this, it's about a lot of organizations are asking, well, how do we build better AI, or even just how do we start, what's our first step? How do we start investing in this and training our people? But I really feel that that's the wrong question. I think the better question is, how do we govern intelligence responsibly? Because the real challenge isn't the capability. We're always going to be able to get more sort of computing power and data centers. And so the real challenge is about control, trust, and accountability. So let's go back. To talk about library science and information science, we actually have to go back a couple of thousands of years to the era of scribes. So for thousands of years, humans have shaped knowledge systems. And humans have always had a need to record thought. Information professionals are those specialized roles which record human thought, and this is the same today. So to understand where we are, we have to sort of look back to our history. So for thousands of years, societies have relied on people to manage knowledge, from scribes to archivists, librarians, and each of those roles has shaped what was recorded and what was preserved, and ultimately what was known. And in the control of this information has always meant control of decisions. So knowledge has always been power. Who controls knowledge controls decisions. Institutions like libraries, archives, they didn't just store information, they shaped access, visibility, and truth. And now AI is scaling that power in ways we've never seen before. The rise of information professionals. This is effectively a sort of 19th century concept. But when we think about it, ethical stewardship and ethics that we're talking about it with AI, I mean, this has existed since the time of information professionals. In the 19th century, something happened where information work actually became a profession. So now it's encoded with standards, systems, ethics. We started to formulate and formalize ideas like fair access, intellectual freedom, responsible stewardship. So these ideas that we're speaking about in the context of AI, they're really not new. They've always been part of this information culture. They're just being rediscovered and maybe amplified in the AI era. So we're moving on. So as information systems laid the foundation for AI and the information grew, we then built systems and meta systems to manage it. So metadata, indexing, search, these weren't just technical innovations, they were ways of structuring reality. And they laid the foundation for everything we now call data science. Digital explosion. So this is really around 1990, sort of 2000s era. The problem shifted from access then to trust. Internet changed everything. The information became abundant, or rampant even, overwhelming. The challenge then shifted. It was no longer how do we access information, it became how do we trust it. Then here we are in the era of AI, and there have been some unintended consequences. They call us failures, but it's really not failures, it's unintended consequences of introducing and implementing AI at scale. These failures, they're rooted in flawed information. And I have a couple of case studies here. I have the links in the end of this presentation if anybody wants to follow up and read more about this. We've already seen what happens when some of these systems go amok. Bias in hiring, discrimination in lending, errors in facial recognition. I mean, some of these could be, really affect people's lives in the worst way. I mean, they're not just technical failures. Again, they're failures of information. What data was used, how it was interpreted, and what context was missing. Responsible AI. And now we're here. This is the moment that we're in. It's a governance response in many ways. This is where responsible AI kind of emerged from, not as a trend, but as a response to real harm, as I had shown in the previous slide. The principles are familiar: fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy. These are not engineering concepts, they're governance concepts. Take a little diversion here into the EU AI Act. I think some others have probably talked about this, but I mention it here because it's related to this concept of responsible AI. You actually see roles in corporations now for a responsible AI leader, and it's important to talk about this regulation as not only being the first, but probably the most systemic and the most sort of global reach that's affecting how corporations respond to the implementation of AI. So it's the first major attempt to regulate AI at scale. It's important to understand how it does this. It's introducing a risk-based framework. At the highest level, there are just simply some systems that are totally prohibited. Others are classified as high risk and heavily regulated. This is what most companies are struggling with now. Like, how do you determine whether or not something's high risk? What do you do? What are the guardrails and controls around it? The rest fall into lower risk categories with lighter requirements. So that's what most of us probably use in our day-to-day, is the generative tools and Copilot and Gemini and so forth. The key idea is the higher the risk to people, the stricter the rules. Again, it also emphasizes transparency, accountability, human oversight. And this matters not just if you're operating in Europe, but globally. And this regulation will definitely shape how AI is built and governed worldwide, much like, if you remember, the GDPR and what that did for data privacy. It sort of set a de facto standard, and the EU AI Act is likely to follow the same path. generative shift. This is really only in the past couple of years. So now AI creates information at scale. This is a new phase. It doesn't just analyze the information, it also creates it. Text, images, music, art, decisions. It sort of raises a critical question. If AI generates this information, who then is responsible for its truth? So what do? So we have to govern the full system. We need to rethink what AI actually is. It's not just a model. The system of inputs, outputs, feedback loops, context, and systems require governance, not just optimization. So who comes into play here? Well, again, the information professionals. We already have people who are trained to do this. Information professionals have always been managing data quality, governance, classification, access, ethics. They've been doing this now for decades, they already manage data, context, and ethics. This is already sort of part and parcel of the role. But the role is changing now. It's not just the profession, it's the application of the profession that is changing. Cataloging, well, that now becomes data curation. Reference, that becomes AI validation. Literacy becomes AI literacy. This is not disruption, it's an evolution of not only the skills, but the evolution of the skills to meet the needs of the time. Human in the loop, this is a key concept for responsible AI. So it's about the people. Humans are the ones that ensure the accountability. AI doesn't remove our role, it changes our role from doing the work now to judging the work, ensuring accuracy, providing context, and probably the most important is to maintain the trust. So you're leading a team of people, you're a C-suite executive, you need to invest in AI. What do you do? Well, this is a leadership issue, not just technical, because the risks are massive and financial, reputational, legal, strategic. Trust is no longer optional, it's a product feature. So we have a little bit of a gap, and these gaps introduce the opportunity for failure. So what I see in many organizations is they are investing heavily in sort of the building of AI, investing in sort of software, but they underinvest in the governance of it, aka the people. And this is where failures actually happen. The question isn't whether we have the information professionals, it's whether or not we've positioned them to govern intelligence or simply to support it, support systems, or to be in that sort of supportive service role. So why aren't the existing roles enough? Well, most organizations believe they've solved this because they have data leadership, but ownership is fragmented. Data, models, and compliance are separate, and any company you're going to see these are different, not only different roles, but they're different divisions or departments in a company. AI failures happen between these silos, and the opportunity here is to unify accountability. So, today we have the CDOs that manage data governance and, engineering, product, legal, these are all sort of separate functions in a company. The future vision of this for responsible AI leadership is that information leaders are governing end to end. And this is a unified model of accountability, not fragmented across different corporate or divisional lines. And there's a real opportunity here to do this. Counter argument, you could say, well, don't we already have this in most companies? Well, okay, as I just said, that yes, organizations have invested in data roles, but those roles were built for a different era. And now AI introduces decision-making at scale. The gap is not capability, it's ownership. The question is not whether roles exist, but whether anyone owns AI trust end to end. So again, currently, again, the data roles, they focus on sort of end state or pipelines. No one owns AI decisions, and companies seem to react, sort of problems or harms or just simply to keep them out of jail. The required shift is that AI decision AI decisions are not just data decisions. We have to think of this as a more unified experience and a response. And we need to elevate not just data leadership, but information leadership. So again, I'm talking about owning and sort of investing in those roles, but it's ensuring and developing that trust and maintaining that from end to end. So what do? It's a call to action. We're going to do three things. We're going to elevate information professionals, all of us. We're going to build governance into the AI systems. And we're going to invest in AI literacy across the organization. We don't need new capabilities as much as activate the ones that we already have. The core idea here is that responsible AI, it's an information problem. It's not a technical problem. Again, this is about investing in the people to take on these roles, to ensure trust, and to ensure a unified vision across the entire pipeline. And a couple of examples or suggestions of how this can be done. So information professionals, obviously, as I've argued, they're not peripheral to AI. They're foundational. They determine what data goes into systems, how it's structured, and how bias is identified. And without strong data curation and context design, AI systems inherit flaws. This is where the leadership begins at the input layer. So some suggestions here as shifting the role from service-oriented or support-oriented into a leadership role is to, again, sort of owning that pipeline of data curation and the training sets, be able to detect and mitigate bias, designing metadata and context systems, and to enable trustworthy AI foundation. Human in the loop and the trust layer. So AI can't be trusted without the human validation. Information professionals play the critical role of reviewing outputs, ensuring traceability, and preventing harmful feedback loops. They're the trust layer between AI systems and real-world decisions. So some suggestions here about validating AI outputs before the use or before implementation, ensuring explainability and traceabilities, key concepts, designing feedback capabilities, so like feedback loops, and to act as an accountability checkpoint. Strategic leadership. This is really where I see the profession heading. So at the highest level, this is about governance. Information professionals should lead responsible AI frameworks, participate in decision-making bodies, and educate organizations. They're uniquely positioned to bridge technical systems and human values. So again, I am now seeing this more and more, the AI council lead or AI governance, lead role or ethics, sitting on an ethics board, building out responsible AI frameworks. It's a project I'm involved in now, leading the ethics review board, as just mentioned, driving AI literacy across an organization. and classifying and managing AI risks. What does the future look like? Well, I'm not sure any of us know, but we could sort of see the sort of trends of where we're headed. We're entering a new era. It's not defined by who builds AI, but by who governs it responsibly. And the organizations that understand this first will lead what comes next. Those who govern the intelligence will lead. I have a couple of slides here at the end for further reading. Obviously, you can't read this here, but it's if you download the presentation, you can refer to the list I had of case studies. I have some references of where I researched this presentation from. That's always helpful. See the past references. And I just want to thank you for being part of the change, because the change is among us, and we are all a part of it. Thank you very much.
Fleur, I have a couple questions because
Oh, great.
it's clear that this change is coming. And you laid out the problem very clearly, and I think everybody can identify with the challenges that if they're not already facing, they will face. But in your experience with organizations, do you see how do you see this elevation of the information professionals taking place? How do you get it started? How do you ramp up?
Yeah, great question. So, and I see it in the effort that I'm working on now. I'm consulting to a large corporation. I think it starts with data governance. The keynote earlier today talked about AI is a data use case, and I really like that. That's just still about data at the heart of it. So what I see happening is data governance organizations, which approximately 20 years, more or less, have been a thing that's been building up. So most companies, I'd say, would have some semblance of data governance in their organization. It's about now retooling and ramping up those organizations and making sure that they're trained to, build the frameworks with which to recognize bias and discrimination and obviously to respond to regulations. But it's really more about a shift from this old way of working in like a supporting centralized function to now AI is embedded everywhere, and the guardrails and controls simply have to be transparent within the system and built in there by design. So what I'm finding more and more is that I go into an organization and they're building out an AI, like as if it's some separate thing, an AI governance team, and they're standing alongside a data governance organization. It's like, no, it's all one group. So now we need to elevate the data governance professionals, and since a lot of that work would be automated anyway, we have to train these groups to recognize this shift that the technology brings, and to still maintain that kind of like AI governance. AI governance becomes everyone's job because of how pervasive the tools are. So I think it starts with a data governance organization.
And is there a particular level? Is it a top-down thing typically, or do you think that the governing of AI is recognized by people? Is it a leadership
Who
thing?
does it?
Who does
Yeah.
it is what I'm trying to get at. Yes.
Well,
thank you.
I made the point here about leadership and executives, and executives hold budgets and they're investing, and I feel that AI governance starts to become everyone's job because everyone's using these tools, but we're not really worried about summarizing an email or using Gemini to create an image. It's really more about, we're putting our IP into a training model and we have no idea what IP is leaving the firm. So who owns and controls this? Well, I think in many ways it's everyone's job, but I do see the kind of elevation of the data governance groups as a sort of centralized function, but there are different councils that are created to manage, like IP and legal risk, and I think that sort of compliance organizations start to build up there. And you have to have some senior sponsor, some executive sponsor at the top that is going to empower these roles to perform that executive function. And I've seen a lot where there's different parts of a company that are just standing up their own AI, the tools and systems, and it's like, well, who's managing all of that? There doesn't seem to be like an oversight group. So I do see it's a top of the house issue to have the awareness of it and to support the groups that are in the sort of the day-to-day function. But I do think it's a little bit in everyone's job, but there's this kind of idea of a unified data and AI governance group that's still going to be sort of managing the rollout of these tools and the software and standing up guardrails for things like bias and discrimination and so forth.
Thank you. I don't want to monopolize the question opportunity here. Does anybody else have questions for Fleur? Okay, one moment.
You have mentioned earlier about one of your slides about AI unintended consequences, not just as a leaders, right? But more of like developers. Sometimes, even managers can be developers of AI as well. How can we be more intentional on our AI implementation, yet still support speed to market, based on your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm wrestling with now. There's always the engineers and the teams that want to just run. I think it's a balance. We can't wait because it's a speed to market issue. But if we run too fast, you're sort of like running with scissors in the dark. I think it's important to have that senior leadership, that strong kind of voice, and maybe that's a council or a group at the top that's kind of laying out what the strategy is, and then to invest in pilots. I don't see enough of that. It seems to be like an all or nothing approach. Like, oh, we're just gonna buy 3,000 Gemini licenses and just turn it on tomorrow. And it's like that's not a strategy. That's a tool. And like you can't back into the strategy. So I think organizations really need to identify who are their leaders in this space and ensure that they've got, they understand what the business goals of the organization are, and then they understand what the power of the tools are, and that they can actually communicate with one voice to an organization. And, I see this now in the company that I'm consulting to. Different arms of the organization are better funded than others, or they're just more of a maverick style, and no one's saying no. So I think that as a company, as a corporation, or even as a smaller firm, you need to approach this with one voice, but to ensure that yes, we're listening to you, we're investing, we're training people up, but we have a sort of a company, almost like a code of ethics of how we operate. So I would start there. Thanks for the question.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll go again. So
Thank you.
sorry. Is
No,
it these committees that would be responsible for rolling out AI literacy more broadly across the organization? And do you see these committees being like cross-functional so that then this information can be parallel in delivery throughout the organization when people need to be taught about AI literacy?
Yes, definitely a cross-functional approach. I think what's some of the earlier unintended consequences, I think, because mainly it was very siloed in the thinking, like the traditional way that companies are organized and functions are separated. The impact of AI systems is so it is so pervasive that it must be cross-functional. There's no one person that's or one group that's managing or leading this. We do need representation across these different arms of the organization. And also, just from a sort of management standpoint, everybody has to have buy-in and skin in the game. They can't be left out of this kind of tools that can revolutionize not only how we work, but just the concept of work itself. I mean, I see the concept of work is fundamentally shifting. So I think it is important, as you mentioned, that you have the different arms of the organization represented and the different functional sort of roles as well.